tell you tales of her frankness and her candor. I had the opportunity to fill in for my mother a couple times on taking her on errands. And I heard Lynn talk about taking her to the doctor or to the bank. And unfortunately, the one and only time, and this is an example of Aunt Bertha, I had a Ford Explorer at the time, and Aunt Bertha was in her early 80s, and it became obvious that Aunt Bertha was not going to get into the car without help. And me being the former Marine, I had a mission in front of me, and I was capable of performing it, so I put Aunt Bertha rather unceremoniously up on my shoulder and shoved her into the truck. and we went about the errands, and we came back, and I kind of had to pull her out of the truck and get her to the ground safely. And she gave me a pat on the shoulder and said, "I don't think you need to take me on errands anymore. Thank you." So I was off the hook on that. She was the guest of honor at my wedding, filling in. Both my grandparents had passed away at the time, and so she filled in, and proudly so. She was proud to take part in my wife and I's wedding 20 years ago, in June actually, and I have video of her proudly announcing who she was and the relationship to the family. Someone mentioned pruning roses, and I wrote in red here, and I'm sorry I added another 30-second thing here, but we talk about the food and we talk about the roses. She came to our house, we live in Orange County, and she was watching me. My wife told me I had to peel the apples to make the apple pie, because we were going to impress Aunt Bertha with our apple pie, which I thought was a mistake to start with, because that wasn't going to happen. But and so she was watching me labor in my fumbly ways, getting the skin off the apple. And she came up behind me and slapped my hand, took the knife from me, and proceeded to skin the apple in one long peel all the way around in about 3 seconds. She said, "That's how you do it, now go sit down." She also, at the same event actually, I had pruned roses and brought them into the house. My wife wanted roses in the house because we know Bertha loved them. And she pulled one out of the vase and said, "Who cut this? Who pruned this? Who took this out?" And I said, "It was me." And she took me out for a 30-minute lesson on how to prune roses. And I now know that it's just below or above the 5-leaf. Yes. So, and I've taught that to my wife and other people, and because I'm afraid to make that mistake again. She gave me the gift of some stock one time, which was very generous, and out of the blue, she pulled me aside to hand me the envelope, and she said, and like Lynn says, I was afraid of her, so I was going to do whatever she said. She said, "Put this away somewhere, don't ever look at it, don't do anything with it." She came to me a decade later and said, "Have you been checking the stock?" And I said, "No, you told me not to do anything with it, it's in the safe deposit box." She said, "Well, you're supposed to look at it, but you're not supposed to touch it." She goes, "Now go look at the paper." And I had to go find the stock in the paper, and she taught me how to read the stock market in the newspaper, which I had never done before. Her generosity was out of the blue sometimes. She certainly would remember me on my birthday. I don't know if I was the anointed one, but she was always very kind to me, and I felt honored by her attention. She lamented the loss of my mom, and she was devastated by it. And she told me that several times, and certainly wrote that in letters. But she also, and not until he had passed away, told me that my dad, and only once did she say it, was a good man. So, she had a hard life. She was determined to make it. She did. She succeeded. She's impacted by the fact that you're here. She's impacted us all to varying degrees, and we all have our memories of her. She was my aunt. My mom made sure I understood her, where she came from, and why I should look at her perhaps differently. She never kissed me, but she always let me hug her. She just wasn't that way, but that was okay. She knew the value of money. She made sure I knew the value of money. She made it very clear. And she expected us each to stand on our own 2 feet. And we did. Even when perhaps we could have taken advantage of maybe a gift from her or something, she made it very clear that she made it on her own, and we were going to do the same. That's a good lesson to learn. One thing she did do is my wife and I adopted 2 children from Russia. And I'd always kind of thought which part of the family won't accept them and which will. If if you look on the table in there, she has pictures of them, the twins. And she sent $100 to each of them to start their college fund. And $100, maybe to some of us, isn't that big a deal, but to Aunt Bertha, that was a big deal. And it was a supreme act of generosity. And that kind of is Aunt Bertha. Maybe some people didn't understand that, but she was kind-hearted. She was a good woman. So, the old Swedish proverb, don't let your sorrow come higher than your knees. She certainly didn't allow it to come higher than her knees, but she did show her sorrow. So in her honor, I'm not going to allow the sorrow above my knees, but I will remember her and appreciate that she was my good aunt.